Hello, thanks for joining us. March is Women's History Month, with International Women's Day, IWD, falling on March 8. The day celebrates women's achievements while raising awareness about gender inequality and discrimination. The month continues that trajectory. In moving forward together, one slot takes on the much talked about subject that still lags, that is African women in leadership. Our conversation today is triggered by the author of Can Feminism Be African? Minna Salami. Writing on The Guardian, she asked, must leaders be men? For her, Africanness may be perceived as neutral, yet it is overwhelmingly shaped by male experiences. This, she says, is evident in political leadership, cultural representation, intellectual traditions, and social structures where men dominate positions of influence. She gave instances. The recent all-male elections at the African Union with no female candidate. Again, she says, most African farmers are women, yet many are denied land ownership simply because they are not entitled to own property or manage money. She argues further that while Pan-Africanism shaped modern African identity more than any other movement, in its earliest days, it had been almost exclusively male-driven and had largely ignored African women's experiences. She wonders, as many would, if women were equal architects of the continent, what kind of structures would they build? How would Africa's founding mothers shape issues such as its global, that is the continent's global role, conflict resolution, democratic leadership, or land ownership? It is a given that efforts towards equality exist, but Salami says these remain isolated instances rather than systemic changes, and that's where this conversation comes in. My guests are capable. On this road to equality, we have Ndi Kato. She's the former spokesperson, Labour Party Presidential Campaign Council. She's joining us from the US. We have Gloria Agyare, environmentalist, Green Growth Africa. She joins us from the UK. We'll have another guest much later. I'll introduce her when she does join us. Okay, I understand we have Dr. Abiola Akiyode-Afolabi. Thank you very much for joining us. She's the convener, Woman Manifesto. Did I get that right? Dr. Abiola, if you can hear me. Okay, I think your device is muted, so I can't quite hear what you're saying.
Okay, I said Womanifesto.
Womanifesto. Thank you so much for giving us your time. All right, let me start with Ndi. Let's start with Salami's not so glib question. Do you see African as male? Is that a general perception or just an argument she's putting forward?
Leadership positions, we're still seeing that the question of whether women belong in these spaces is coming up. It's really sad, as with what happened with the AU. Unfortunately, this is 2025, as we'll say in layman's terms, big 2025, and we're still having situations like this where there is no gender sensitivity. There is no space for that. Women have been pushing, and not just pushing, but showing in the kind of work, the kind of outputs they give in spaces where women are women frequent, that look, we're equal to the task. In fact, I dare say better at doing the task, and at the end of the day still omitted. So I would say that women belong in these spaces. The question of leadership for women should not even come up, because naturally women are born leaders. We nurture, we take care of things, we grow things from the home front all the way to any leadership position that women have been put in. I mean, there are examples across different sectors of women who have been able to break barriers and do things. I mean, I would use Nigerian examples. In politics, we would have Okonjo Iweala, Amina Mohammed, Dora Akunyili. Business and economy, we have Ibudun Awosika, Folorunsho Alakija. and activism. I mean, the likes of Fumilayo and some Kutiobi Ezekwesili, a lot of us women, we're all doing things. So to have that in 2025, we're still having these exclusions, still having these omissions and questions as to whether we belong, I don't think should be so. I think that women should be front and center in these spaces. And remember that leadership should also be about representation. People want to see people who look like them, who understand their issues from an experience point of view, to be in spaces where they can speak for and advocate for them. So at this point, I don't think that, we should be having spaces where it's just one gender or just one age demographic that should be in it. If I exist, I should be represented. Women should be represented in these spaces. And of course, we can see in the quality of leadership, women bring certain qualities to leadership spaces. Women bring certain qualities to leadership spaces. We're more empathetic when we lead. We have more care and empathy in the way we present our issues, in the way we lead nations, in the way we lead in places where we're allowed into or places where we fight our way into. So I think that at this point, having that conversation is quite erroneous. Women belong in these spaces, and it should be the natural course of things that when there is a space, when there is a conversation about leadership, women should be there.
I mean, you are expressing a strongly held view among women, but whether that is cutting across enough is, the crux of the question when we're trying to see what Salami's definition of Africanness mean. Does the perception still encompasses just the male version of what history could be? And then she talked about how the influence over time of women participating in making history seems a lot dimmer. I will come to you now, Gloria, and let's get your thoughts on looking at our complex history and unique setup. Do you give ears to theories that perhaps the way we see Africa today is not rooted really in gender equality, but more on a Western invention? So we don't have this unique perception that is African, because Africa in itself is a mix of a lot. Do we call diasporan Africans? Do we call, Europeans? There are Africans there. So what does it mean in today's world to be African?
For this opportunity and this platform. First off, I would want to acknowledge the fact that colonization, colonialism, all of these things that we have gone through in decades and centuries ago has had great impact on how we even classify who we are, where we come from, and what we represent. And truly, this has really affected the African continent, where my personal experience with even traveling to some parts of like the northern part of Africa, where when people see you, they call you and then they claim, oh, you are African. Why is it that they don't also see themselves as African or as Africans? Also means that there's a lot of narrative that has been shared across within society in which we within the continent have even embraced it. Now, looking at modern times, we have seen a great evolution. It's been significant anyways. The concept of Pan-Africanism has really grown over the years, where it's more about we being proud to be Africans, to come from this continent. We've been able to take Africa out there, let people know that Africa is a safe space and all of that. However, I think that there's still a long, long way to go. Why? Because still the narrative about color representing Africa, the narrative about so many things representing Africa is really questionable. And I really like what Salami wrote in her article, which is very triggering, because indeed, Africa has been labeled as black. Meanwhile, we have people who are white, we have people who are fair, who are from Africa and all of that. Pan-Africanism has been a great advocacy on the side of the AU. But today what we are seeing now, and with the issues being raised by Salami in her article, really shows that, yes, we have to pride ourselves, we have to be happy, we have to represent Africa wherever we find ourselves. But are women tagged along this particular notion? Are women tagged along this particular evolution? how are women being placed and positioned to help also represent the African culture wherever we find ourselves, regardless of the skin color or wherever we come from or the part of Africa we come from? It's something we need to also untie here.
Yeah, so I needed to bring up that part because it was at the heart of her submission. Now, if we have a clear definition of what it means to be African today, and it truly encompasses the role of women in leadership, then we would know where we are headed. Let me go back to what Ndi said at the beginning, that progress has been made. There is no disputing that. African women have they've grown so much that we have female heads of state. These are significant strides in leadership that women have made over the years. But the question is, how is this reflecting on the road to equality? Is it truly making any dent if we have organizations like the AU today that can run an election with no female candidate? Doctor?
Well, it's rather unfortunate that AU is still at that level, especially if you look at some of the development that have happened within the African Union when they moved from the Organization of African Unity to the African Union. And the fact that they had also committed to several documents talking about gender equality. There is a SEDGA where they made clear commitment, to gender equality, and they also talk a lot around 2063 and the need to be able to achieve equality for all. And if we do not forget, among the regional spaces, the AU also was one of the first that came up with the Maputo Protocol, which was signed by about 54 head of states, across Africa, committing to promoting and protecting women's human rights. And one of the clear issues that they made, in that protocol was also the need in I think Article 7, the need for political participation of women. So if we had gone that far, and I am not going to say that that women have not been able to be at the forefront in AU because they have not made attempts, or because they have not they are not qualified, or they don't have the competency or capacity to participate within the AU. But it is the same challenge that we have at the subnational level, that we also have at that level, where despite the 50-50, they have parity, they have even gender parity proclamation for 50-50 within the AU. They have the gender policy, so they have all the things that could point them towards having an African Union that respects the equality of women. But the will to make that happen, and the fact that patriarchy had made it so strong for the male folk to always want to lead. So they do everything, to prevent, even when we have the most capable of women, to be able to lead. And so for me, I think that's the problem with Africa. So it is a lot of so what they do more is to do a lot of lip service, than actually in the real sense willing. If you look at the SADC region, for example, there is a protocol that also supports inclusion of women. So it is not ECOWAS also has its own protocol. So one would have expected to go further here.
Patriarchy is something, I don't even want us to go towards that conversation now. Maybe in the course of the conversation, we will take that on. But theories abound, laws abound, implementation, and that's the heart of Salami's submission. Systemic changes seem to still be lagging behind. Discriminatory laws and practices still persist despite all the progress that has been made. Ndi, I want to come back to you to speak to us on some of the persistent barriers that continue to prevent African women from ascending to leadership positions across all sectors.
I would say part of the barriers, political underrepresentation. Women still hold a minute number of roles in the political space. And if we're not represented in this space, laws that need to be passed, need to be made to make sure that women come up in these spaces. It's almost like which one comes first, the chicken or the egg, We need more women in political positions to ensure that these laws are passed. And these laws are not passed fast enough or are not taken seriously enough because women are not in these positions, and that's where we find ourselves. So I would say political underrepresentation. Also, there's cultural and traditional barriers. With cultural and traditional barriers, I mean, we still have a lot of cultures. In many cultures, women are supposed to are kept behind. Women are meant to not be seen and to not be heard. Where I come from, I mean, I come from Kaduna State, and we still have parts of Kaduna State and other parts of northern Nigeria where women, you know, some women cannot go out, cannot do things without permission of their husband. And this permeates through largely parts of Africa. I mean, even other parts of Nigeria that are not north and still have these issues. So with cultural and traditional barriers, we still have this, you know, women don't even have where they come from. You know, they're born into this family, but they are not seen as they come from this family or this community because they're expected to be married off to another community. And when they end up in those communities, still they're not seen as members of that community because they came from another community. So all of these things still contribute. You know, the girl child still seen as not being equal, the girl child not being given opportunities towards education, being married off early. All of these things contribute. Economic disparities. Women have less access to financial resources. I think the issue with land and inheritance, I think you mentioned that earlier on in the conversation. I mean, and you know, most of the conversations around wealth starts with land. Women do not have access to land. Women are a great number of the farmers that exist in Nigeria and in Africa, but we do not have access to land, therefore keeping us poor. Again, with the rest of the economy, many things we cannot inherit, lots of things that women cannot have access to. Even when it comes to getting jobs, you'd hear them say, oh, we cannot give you this job, we prefer to give a man, you'll have a man who will take care of you, the other men who need this job. Many places, women have to jump several hurdles. Women have to perform 10 times as hard to have the opportunities. And honestly, that doesn't work.
Quite sad that we're still talking about... sorry to interrupt, Ndi. Quite sad that in 2025 we're still talking about women crossing unnecessary hurdles to make an impact. I will cross to Gloria to put a question based off what you just submitted about political underrepresentation. And when you say that, what comes to my mind is in Nigeria, for instance, the clamor for affirmative action, and then you have these perfunctory efforts to please the polity that something is actually being done. Where do you stand on affirmative action really in political underrepresentation? Because men take what they want. Shouldn't women be taken as against asking?
Okay, thank you very much for this really important question. I think that first off, we need to acknowledge, and I would also touch briefly on what Ndi said, that we need to acknowledge some of the structures involved within society that is actually ruling against women, I would say. Now, let's look at culturally. Even culturally and from our homes, we have barriers already where women do not have to just outrightly go for things that they want. You have to always ask. And that is how we've been trained. For a woman, even in today's modern world, for a woman to say that I am just going for it, you can imagine the kind of struggles and barriers that person will face, including the backlash both from fellow women and even other men. I am a strong advocate against, cultural systems that hold people down without allowing them to unleash what they really have within. And I think that these are some of the things that have actually restricted us, because we have so many good policies, like we've gone through so many policies where they said in the AU system, they have all of the things that will ensure gender equality, will ensure women's participation in various aspects of the system. However, deep-rootedly, we realize that, and that's what Salami is saying about the systemic barriers, we have culturally accepted or embraced the concept of men being able to go in for what they want, and women don't either know what they want, women are not focused, women are all over the place. So therefore, they need to ask for someone to assess what they are asking for and now give permission that, okay, yes, I think you can go in for this. And even going in for that, there's some kind of restriction that, okay, when you're going in for this, take this, don't take this, you know, this thing is not for a woman, this thing is for a man. These deep-seated roots are one that we need to disrupt within society. And I'm so happy that in political leadership, even today, Namibia has its first female president, which is very, very impressive. We have Salif, Her Excellency Ellen Johnson from Liberia. Various women have come up to challenge the status quo. And I'm sure if they are to share their practical challenges in trying to push, in trying to not to ask, but go for it, we would really be astounded by it. So I think that now it's really important that we engage community leaders, we engage households, because I think that if we really want to change system, it has to come from the home where everyone grows up from, or everyone is being nurtured from, to break those structures and build women to go for things just as men also go for things. Because we are living in a world where if today, as an environmentalist, right now climate change affects everyone. If there's rainfall, it's going to affect everyone. So why is it that one group cannot go out there and go for what they want, and we have another group just dictating what it means?
Gloria, let me stay with you for a bit so that when I move on, I know I've moved on. Land ownership, you're an environmentalist, so you have an idea some of the challenges these women face. What would be your suggestion as to how we can, let's not look at Africa-wide, let's look at where we're domiciled at the moment, Nigeria. What would be your suggestion as to improving that? Because I know there was a law before the Senate at some point. Salami referenced it, but I did not check info. Doesn't seem that women have we been empowered for land ownership? Where are we at with that?
Okay, thank you very much. Let me give a little context. So within the food and agriculture sector, you realize that you find a lot of women. FAO says that about 60% of women are found within this sector, but less than 16% own land. Why is this so? If women are the active force of this particular sector, it means that generally there's a notion that women cannot own things or cannot take care of things in terms of leadership, in terms of being able to unearth what a potential that lies within either like resources like money, land, and all of that. And it's really challenging. Now, I think that to address some of these issues, yes, there are policies, but we know in sub-Saharan Africa, the policy implementation has been our major gap within society. In bridging this gap, we need political will. I cannot even underestimate the power of a leadership or having like a president, female, male, coming to say that I want to give an ear to this particular issue. I want to work with various key stakeholders, right from bottom up, to ensure that some of these things are addressed. The notion that women cannot take care of resources, assets, and all of that needs to be changed. Now, I've seen that there are so many women taking over in the agri-food industry, in the environmental space. Women have been doubted so much, but when they get out there, like Ndi said, they use emotional intelligence, so many factors to be able to get things going. If we are able to get political will, we can ensure that some of these implementation of our policies goes on. I also think that active community engagement is so important in bridging some of these existing gaps. The community leaders, they still hold on to some of these cultural values where women don't have to be here, women are not supposed to be, women don't have the money to buy the land and all of that. If we are to get them ready and psych them up for this particular change that is happening within society, I think we can go a long way. And I know that fighting for some of these spaces is going to be like bloodshed and all of that in extreme case, because these things have lived with us for years and years, but we've come very far because there are women who rose up to the occasion to advocate against the system, to use campaigns and various strategies to disrupt and challenge the status quo. So if we can start from this place, I believe we can go a long way in bridging some of these existing gaps within society.
I mean, the much talked about political will, it's not a lack from women. Women have, over the years, proven themselves over and over again that they are capable. Of course, we have one or two bad eggs, just like we have with our male counterparts. Doctor, I want to ask you to paint us a picture. I mean, some questions that Salami put up was, you know, giving us an idea, saying she wonders if women were equal architects of the continent, what kind of structures they would build, how they would be forming history and all of that. But I want you to tell us what you think the consequences of this continuing underrepresentation of African women in leadership position has, and what it has in the impact it has in the decision-making processes.
It's you know, to have more women in political offices has to be very intentional. And that's where the problem starts from for the African Union. You have to be very intentional about it. Because there are historical injustices that have made it impossible, you know, for women to have that number, you know, in decision making. And so if we want to address those historical injustices, there are steps that we need to take, and we need to have a gender lens on at every point in time. You don't want to go into an election and the election comes up with all men and you don't think there's anything wrong with it, or you are running for office, or you have a panel of conversation and you didn't see, you know, any woman on it and you think it's normal. So there's a need to first shift, you know, the way we think our orientation, to shift from, you know, having this male hegemony, paternalistic form of, you know, thinking. So that's why I say it is going to be very intentional, and I'm going to analyze that, especially in places where, you know, we have seen a lot of development. There are a lot of issues, you know, affecting the question of education. For example, in a country like Nigeria, still the Northwest, we still have almost 60% women who cannot read and write. There are still a whole lot of things that are cultural, that are traditional, you know, that would affect the ability of the woman to come out to vote or to contest election. In some countries like Nigeria, women didn't have the ability to vote until 1979, which was how many years ago? So there are quite a number of systemic and structural issues that are affecting, you know, the ability of women to participate in politics. Now, where we have seen where women have participated in politics, let me first go to Kenya, where we have seen recent increase with the two-third rule that was added to their constitution. We have seen more women that come up as governors in that state, and we have seen also more voices, you know, of women in the parliament. And you can see some of the development that we are seeing coming up in such places. And where we have also had women, you know, as leaders of the country, as president, we have also seen how they have been able to resolve a lot of things. The former president of Liberia, you know, has done a lot in terms of contributing to addressing peace and security. For the number of years that she was there, she ensured that the country did not go back, you know, to war. So, and we have also seen quite a number of women, Konjo-Iweala, who is also leading, and what support she had even provided for Nigeria. We have seen people like Dr. Abiola when she was in Nigeria, when she was a minister in Nigeria, how she was able to turn around the whole problems of corruption with what she brought in as due process. And South Africa has a huge history of how women who have been in parliament have been able to insist on gender budget, address the issue of maternal health for women, and quite a number of things. So having women there would actually make a big difference, because they actually know where they are coming from, and they know oftentimes where they are going to. So more women in politics will help in terms of the solidarity that we're talking about for women. It will help in terms of addressing some systemic issues, which some are very unseen. You know, some happens in workplaces, you know, and of course, because women have participated or have been part of that process, you know, it's important, it then becomes necessary for them, you know, to raise that if you are in a position of, it's not a 1 + 1 is 2 kind of. So one is not saying that all women are at the same level, and that once you put a woman in a position, that is just the answer. So there are still a lot of other things that we need to do, even when we get into position.
You're quite correct. Ndi, I'll come to you in a bit. I want us to go more towards strategies for better representation when we come back from this break, but I don't know whether that question will work for that. But let's go on a short break. When we come back, I'll be asking Ndi to expand a bit on the cultural barriers. Stay with us. Glad you're still here. We still have 3 guests looking at African women in leadership in Africa. I have Ndi Kato, former spokesperson, Labour Party Presidential Campaign Council. She is in the US, joins us live from there. Gloria Agyare, environmentalist, Green Growth Africa. UK, Dr. Abiola Akiyode-Afolabi, convener, Womanifesto, also joins us from the UK. Ndi, when your earlier submission, we were talking about barriers to getting women better representation in leadership. You talked about political underrepresentation. I shifted that question to Gloria, but you might want to add something to that, so you have the floor. I'll also just add the second question for time reasons. Cultural barriers. That I would want you to pay a lot of time to. We are a cultural society. Some people say we're defined by our beliefs, but does some of our cultural practices need to evolve? You can give us an instance of one that could and how it could evolve.
For cultural barriers, there's something I keep saying about culture. Culture is now, Culture should live to serve human necessity, not human necessity bending over for culture. And that is how societies that move forward behave. That is how societies that move forward evolve. They bend culture to what it is that is necessary now and create things that are necessary for today, and that becomes culture. Unfortunately for us in Africa, we see culture as something from the past that should dictate what it is today. And it is not helping us, In other things, we will tend to move forward, but with things that benefit, that can help our society move forward properly, we would say, no, culture says this. For example, we can't be saying in 2015 that in 2025 that the method of communication is to go to the middle of the town square, hold a gong and keep hitting it to say the king said this message, because that is not what communication is today. Communication culture has evolved, so the rest of culture must evolve. We still have patriarchal practices where we do not believe that women belong in certain spaces. I've used Northern Nigeria as an example, where even education for the girl child is seen as a problem. When I've forgotten her name, but the woman who ran for governor of Adamawa State came out, a lot of people, even in her party, said they did not support her because she was a woman, because they do not believe that women belong in spaces where leadership is. And a lot of them pointed to religion too, that based on their religion, women should not be leaders. Based on culture, women should not be leaders. And this really cost that woman a great deal of that election, even though she fought and she fought. And so we continue to see that in parts of the East, we would see places where, female politicians have said that when it's time to count the votes, they will take the ballot box to religious houses, basically shrines. They'll take the ballot boxes to shrines where women are not allowed to enter, and say they are counting the ballot box there, thereby excluding women's voices from the counting process and rigging the elections against women. There are so many other things like that. So based on this, patriarchal norms. I know Dr. Akiyode mentioned patriarchal norms, and we didn't want to talk about it, but we have to talk about it because many of these things point back to patriarchal norms. Patriarchal norms and gender roles, believing that women belong in certain spaces and should be centered in those lower spaces, but not in leadership. Also, we still have traditional beliefs and stereotypes. Women who are leaders are still seen as unfeminine, are still seen as, somebody was talking to me yesterday and he said, oh, there's a name for people like me, women like me who have achieved certain things, that we are women with the heart of a man. I said, no, I'm not a woman with the heart of a man. I'm the woman with the heart of a woman. This is how women behave. Women are powerful. Women can do certain things. In fact, women can do all things. So all of these still come into play. I mean, I still talk about limited access to resources. Remember when I talked about what comes first? A lot of these things still affect us. Women do not have access to as much resources as men have access to. And these resources affect women's political participation. If women cannot inherit, if women are not expected to have a certain amount of money, if women cannot make a certain amount of money because of cultural limitations, they can't participate in the politics of the day, because politics itself is capital and extensive. It's capital heavy. We also have a culture of violence that permeates the Nigerian society. The Nigerian society is inherently violent, and women are by nature not violent in the same way that men are. Unfortunately, this violence has gone through the entire political space and makes it very difficult for women to participate. Women who participate in politics are expected to bend to this violence. I saw a conversation by a former senator, Florence Itagiwa, which I'm very disappointed in, who was saying that, oh, when women get to certain positions, violence against them, they should not speak for it because it's a sign of weakness. No, it's not a sign of weakness. Of weakness. When women get to these positions and they still experience sexual harassment like Senator Natasha is experiencing, it is right that women speak up. A culture of silence against women is what still permeates through the Nigerian society, expecting to silence women when they go through things. Oh, we must keep quiet, we must be hushed so that we don't come out as weak, we don't look like people who are always putting themselves as victims, and this should not work. Women go through these spaces and still experience the patriarchal violence that they experience on every other role. And so this prevents women. Women will see the political space now, and like many other spaces, will be like, oh, I don't want to be treated like this. I don't want to enter these spaces. So these are some of the issues.
Because the point you made, Ndi, I want to interject, because the point you made about women with a heart, or women in politics with a heart of gold, and then there are some level of tolerance you have to have, because how politics have been played over the years involves some nocturnal meetings, violence and all of that. Yes, there is a process to improve our electoral systems and our processes across the continent, but we're not there yet. Should we be waiting until such a time when all the right policies are in place for women to participate, or can women hold their own in the current reality? Because it is only when you are able to infiltrate and become a part of the change structure, you have that leadership and that power, that you can make change that will enhance equality.
Women can hold their own, and women are holding their own. Keep in mind that our electoral system is far from perfect, and this far from perfect electoral system, in fact, seriously flawed, I would say, because far from perfect is putting it lightly. Our electoral system is seriously flawed, and this seriously flawed electoral system, via election rigging, via the cost of running for office, via violence, amongst other things, keep people from participating, but not just keep them from participating, keep them from winning. People who have the support of the people end up not being in power. Many women who come out to run for office have the support of the people and can win if all things being equal. And women participate. Women come out, they participate. The last election saw record numbers of women coming out to participate. Unfortunately, getting the party ticket, again, with limitations from all of these traditional and cultural beliefs that women do not belong in these spaces, tend to hinder them. And even when they get the party ticket, a lot of these patriarchal norms, from violence to rigging and all of that, still come into play and keep women from getting these seats. So let's not say that women do not participate. Women participate. Using Natasha Akpoti as an example again, if you see Natasha Akpoti's journey to getting into office, it was one wrought with violence and all of that against her, and she did not back down. I mean, we had places where she was attacked physically when she tried running for governor. This current election, I remember that a road, they dug a tunnel through a road to ensure a pit through a road to ensure that she could not access certain places to go and campaign. And still she won that election, still rigged that election, she still went to the court. So it means that women know, women are capable, women can fight this to the end. Unfortunately, there's only so much battles that women can push. Natasha Akpoti has the backing, she has the funds, she has all of that behind her, and you can still see what she's going through. What more the average woman who does not have all of this and is fighting to get this? When I ran for office in 2019, I was told, call her when I came out, that look, we know that you're a leader in this society, you have done so much for our community and we are very proud of you. However, for this position, we're not going to give you, for two reasons. One, because you're a woman, and two, because you are young. And they told me to my face, and they said, you know what, just run so that you'll be recognized, and when they are sharing positions, you might get a position from the governor if you win the election, but we're not going to give you this seat. And that is what women are pushing for.
Ndi,
talked about.
You are in the system, so you understand better than most what plays out there. That is the reality of politics in Nigeria. And like you have said, a lot of work needs to be done. But let me bring in the doctor again to take on that part about political will, but in terms of education for women, because education is power. Without more women, more educated women, skilled women coming out, even if you give them funds, they will not be able to do much. So talk to us about how strategies that we can use to increase education availability for women, because as it stands, it doesn't seem like the reach is wide enough. There are still unskilled, untrained, uneducated women having children everywhere. Dr. Akiyode.
Oh, okay. Well, it's there are a lot of things. There are a lot of ways this can be done, but we must also be committed to ensuring that we support and prepare women to also further, be in the space of politics. There are a lot of training going on by civil society organizations in this regard, linking up with women and also encouraging young women. So I think there's a need to focus on young women. So there are networks coming up for young women in politics, where people are getting involved in politics from when they are young. There's also a need to encourage young girls who are also in, because the whole thing is also about building confidence. From what Ndi is saying, what tradition and culture is saying is that you cannot do it. So you need to be walking against the tide. So, and if you want to be able to do that successfully, we have to start doing that from when a child is growing up, from primary, secondary school, into the university, because the whole discussion about even politics within the university, students' unionism, rarely find, women, occupying position in that space. And it's the same traditional and cultural reasons why women cannot, become president in Nigeria. That is also the same reason that will be given to you why you cannot become president in Obafemi Awolowo University or University of Lagos. So it's important to begin to, and also not to focus on women alone, also to focus on boys, so that as we are growing girls, we're also growing boys, and we are making them to understand, that the space is for every one of us, and the society will be better for it if we have both men and women being active, in addressing issues that has to do with governance, development, and what have you.
Okay, quickly, before I move on, quickly, before I move on to Gloria, as we're speaking, I thought of something, family influence. The units, as it were. Because a personal experience in my university days, I attempted to buy a form to run for public office in my local government. And my family vehemently said, you will not do this. So talk to us about the role of family when we talk about education. Yes, education has its role. And then that cultural reorientation, how does all this tie in with upbringing in the family?
Yeah, this is also very important, because you grow up and you also see the family also emphasizing the role of your brother, as a better person than you. So there's a need to begin to also de-emphasize, and that's what I'm saying. In addressing this, we cannot focus on talking to women alone. We must be able to talk to both men and women, and we must also be able to focus people as they are growing up. While I was a student in the university, I decided to run for office, and I won that election. But it was really not easy, because I remember that I have to even say where a tradition is lacking, because the tradition was lacking. It never was. There was never a female PRO in the Students' Union, and so coming up to come and contest at that time, and it was a difficult time. And I had people asking me, as a woman, will you be able to face police when they want to arrest us? Will you be able to go to prison? And things like that. So, and it shows to you, even when people are at the level of university, they still feel that the woman is still a lesser, person. So there is a need to do more. We need to be very intentional. We need to increase our advocacy. We need to increase our awareness. We need to also ask for serious system change. We need to work towards transforming the system in such a manner that the system will be fair, to both men and women, so that as we are growing up, we would have that space and we'll be able to. And so we need to do a lot in terms of organizing.
All right.
We need to do a lot in terms of organizing, of breaking barriers and other things that could help in ensuring that we have more women in leadership.
So true. We have 10 minutes, less than 5 minutes actually. So Gloria, your take on a lot of, like it or not, it's an uphill task, but women are pushing, we're strong. We're strong, really. So I wanted you to speak to sustaining rather, this women's leadership. How can we sustain what we have, and how can we replicate? We've talked about education, but how can we replicate across generation to ensure a lasting impact? I mean, maybe in 20 years from now, when we're talking, we'll be talking about focusing more on competence, whether man or woman, than talking about representation.
Yeah, thank you very much for this question. I would come from a little bit of history where the whole agenda and movement of getting women into leadership and spaces have really evolved. We have made good progress because we had people who had to hold the fort and champion this and ensure that women get into spaces, even if it's just one. We have come very far. Today, we have another conversation on. Today, International Women's Day, we are talking about accelerating action when it comes to women. It's time for us to accelerate action. I think the sustainability of this will really hang on intergenerational relationship, intergenerational support. Why do I say this? I think that me as a young person, especially within the environmental space, within the space of food and agriculture, in between these spaces, I would need someone who has been a step ahead, to let me understand what the existing gaps really looks like. Right now, I'm sure every young person or every young woman who's trying to navigate some barriers is all like hazy and cannot even figure it out, especially meeting or entering spaces where it's highly male dominated. You are at once discouraged and at once broken by such structures. If we have senior leaders, senior women who would be like, let me not necessarily hold your hand. Let me be behind you. Let me whisper some of these pointers, some of these things that can help you navigate these structures in a way that even if it's not like controlling you, but I mean, basically guiding you to help you innovatively find solutions to some of these things. I think we can go a long way sustaining the role of women within society, within addressing issues of climate change, addressing social issues and bridging the gaps that lies in between. I also think that there's a need to build strong institutions around women, and this is something that we always miss out on. Doctor just mentioned about the role of education. We can never even underestimate the power of that. Starting on nurturing it right from bottom up, it means that the next generation can even run with it, even when the older generations are not around. I believe that these things hold a core point to driving sustainability within society and ensuring that women have a voice in leadership.
We're out of time, but I would want the three of you to say something to women in commemoration of the International Women's Day. In 30 seconds each, please. We're out of time. Starting with you, Ndi.
I think we need to keep pushing and keep fighting. We still have to put these laws back into the National Assembly to make sure that these laws are passed. We need more opportunities for women, and we're up to the task. Women belong in leadership spaces.
Doctor?
Well, I want to say that the time is now. Women cannot wait. We just need to get ourselves into power to be able to transform the society. We cannot wait.
Gloria?
Yes, I would say that, yes, again, it's time to really disrupt and challenge the status quo. And women have all it takes to ensure that things are done differently in today's world. Thank you.
Ladies, thank you so much for the gift of your time. Thank you for speaking with us.
It's a pleasure.
And that's our program today. It returns at the same time next week. Until then, stay blessed and happy International Women's Day in advance. I'm Felicity Ezewike. I'll see you next time.